Hello, Pi here to discuss the Treasury oversight contracts that we have been contracted to build. The purpose of these contracts is to provide a set of on-chain smart contracts that provide oversight, accountability, and transparency on Treasury spending. How do they achieve that? Let's first talk about the happy path. What happens under normal circumstances? So under the happy path, somebody will decide to use these smart contracts and submit a governance action saying, let's withdraw 20 million ADA, 5 million ADA from the Treasury into these smart contracts. DREPs will be able to compile the contracts themselves, review the source code, make sure they get the same script address, and then decide whether they want to vote on that contract or not. Assuming that they approve that withdrawal, the contracts have built into them a set of permissioned entities and rules. And one of the things that they can do with that is they can fund specific projects. So they can say, okay, we're going to fund 100,000 ADA into this contract on this payment schedule for this vendor. As that payment schedule comes to pass, the vendor can then withdraw those funds. Now that's the happy path. On this happy path, there are two other things that this kind of oversight committee might be able to do. One of them is an administrative thing where they can reorganize the UTXOs. They can, for example, group them by different purposes, or as long as the funds in are equal to the funds out, they can reorganize those as they see fit. And then additionally, with a different set of permissions, so maybe a higher threshold of signatures, or a different, more trusted set of signers, they can do discretionary spending. So they might use this to do to swap some of that ADA for a stablecoin, either via a DEX or an OTC deal. They could use this to upgrade the contracts in an emergency if some flaw was found, or some new feature was added. But the key thing is this allows you to separate the day-to-day funding of projects and the withdrawals from vendors from that kind of higher threshold, higher oversight, discretionary spending. Now, at the end, I say fiscal year here, but really at the end of an expiration period for this withdrawal, then those funds can get swept back to the Cardano Treasury. The idea being that, at the end of this quote-unquote fiscal year, whether it's a fiscal year or not is entirely just a parameter, but at the end of that expiration, the ADA flows back to the Treasury, and the DREPs can then vote on how that gets spent in the future. And but what if there is, so we talked about the happy path here where we fund a project and then the vendor can withdraw their payments. Suppose that they aren't actually doing the work, or there's a disagreement on whether the work met some standards. Well, there is a mechanism here for this oversight committee can pause those payouts. So they can say, hey, we need to review the invoices. Let's have a discussion about whether this work has been done. And during that time, even if the date that the payment would happen comes and goes, the vendor can't withdraw those. Importantly, the oversight committee can't pause past payouts. So if the funds have already matured without any action, then we assume that those are now the vendor's funds. But you can pause this. You can go back and forth on how to address that. Oh, here's more evidence, or okay, we didn't fix that bug, so we're going to go back and fix that bug. And then that oversight committee can resume those payouts to that vendor. And then the vendor can start to claim those rewards. If at the end of this expiration period, the vendor and the oversight committee can't reach agreement, then those funds, if they're paused, can also go back to the Treasury. And then, this is an extreme breakdown in agreement or consensus. And so at that point, the vendor may submit a proposal to the DREPs to try to convince them and get a kind of special payout for the work that they did. Finally, in some cases, maybe a vendor is no longer able to take on a project or wants to restructure their payment schedule. Maybe they completed some work ahead of schedule, or it's taking longer than anticipated. With agreement from both the vendor and the oversight committee, both of those can happen. You can either pull those funds back to under the oversight committee's purview, so that maybe they can fund a different project with a different vendor, or you can restructure the payment schedule. Hopefully that provides a good overview of what these contracts are and what they provide, and feel free to reach out if you have any other questions.